G'day, Ziggy D here. Day 1 of the first season of Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls is over now. I had a good time leveling. I did just a one session, did about probably a bit under 9 hours of playtime and managed to get to 67. Nothing particularly spectacular, especially when you stack up against some of the people using some of the particular bounties to level very, very quickly, even in less than an hour or so. But I had a pretty good time, and I'm pretty familiar with the process of leveling a hardcore demon hunter now. I actually did a practice run a while before the ladders went live as well, practicing on a demon hunter, starting from scratch, gearing up, you know, using different skills and things like that. So in this video, I just thought I'd share with you guys, because it's something I get asked a lot, what are good skills for leveling the Demon Hunter, how to set up your Demon Hunter as you're leveling through the different stages. Now, builds in Diablo 3 in general are very gear dependent, and if I get certain items, I will change my build around those to best leverage those, or to best take advantage of the situation I'm currently in, to sort of best farm the situation. And there's also this kind of like a meter, a gearing meter that I have going on in the back of my head when I'm leveling a hardcore character. And my build changes depending on that. It starts off at the left side with undergeared, or the right side for you guys apparently, but the left side starts at undergeared, then there is geared, so which is appropriate for your difficulty, and then there's overgeared for your difficulty. Now, there's two things you can do. When you hit the overgeared or the undergeared mark, you can change the difficulty, or you can change your build. Generally, what I usually try and keep my character in the geared to slightly overgeared category. If you're really overgeared, then you should probably change the difficulty up, or maybe you've gotten really lucky, or maybe you've been spending too much time gearing and not enough time just farming, because what happens is mobs level scale with you in Diablo 3 now, and if you're leveling very quickly but not gearing, you'll get undergeared. But if you're gearing a lot but not leveling very quickly, then you will get overgeared. And you want to keep that sort of just in the geared to overgeared category, I think. That's the nice balance between safe and fast. And that's pretty much where I try to lie most of the time. However, if I'm falling into like the geared or the undergeared category, I will change my build to have higher burst damage, higher damage overall skills in a smaller AoE. And when the game gets more difficult, I'll also do that same thing. So that's usually something like Cluster Arrow, especially with the Load of Forbear rune, and Entangling Shot Justices served with Cull the Weak. This is this 3 combination here. This is one of the best, I think, one of the most efficient damage boosting setups, and is very nice when you get towards the later sections of the game. So in like level 60 to level 70, this is a very nice setup. And before that, if your character's not very well geared, I'll often use something like Cluster Arrow that has very high damage but in a smaller AoE. So you sacrifice some of your AoE to be able to get enough damage to burst down elites. However, when you're in the overgeared category, so when your character is very well geared, maybe you got lucky and you got a few legendaries dropped, like for example at one point I got like a Bruiser. When that sort of thing happens, you will change to higher AoE specs. So I will often use things like Bowler Shot with the AoE rune. So we go into just Bowler Shot just here with Volatile Explosives, which improves the AoE. And I'll use something like Chakram with Twin Chakrams. Chakram, I think, is one of the best leveling skills in the game for Demon Hunter. I prefer it like wholeheartedly over Multi-Shot. Multi-Shot is decent, but I think Twin Chakrams is amazing. And it's less damage than something like Cluster Arrow, for example, but the AoE is really good. So when your character is already kind of one-shotting stuff or killing very quickly, you want to maximize your AoE instead of maximizing your burst damage. So that's kind of how I gear my character, how I change my skill setup, my build setup, depending on gearing. And this should be fairly organic. It's a pretty organic leveling experience. It's kind of a fun sort of mini game in itself. But other than that, I'll go over some pretty good general leveling skills. I like Hungering Arrow a lot early in the game. This is what I'll stick with for the most part. Entangling Shot becomes good later once you get Cull the Weak. Cull the Weak synergizes exceptionally well with Entangling Shot. Entangling Shot with Chain Gang, for example, early in the game. One shot will chain up to 4 enemies, and 2 shots will chain an entire pack, basically. So what happens then is every single thing in that pack will take extra damage, 20% extra damage, and then you can unleash some Cluster Arrows or some Chakrams, and that's usually what I'll do right there. But before that, Hungering Arrow is a very good single target and allows you to use, like very early game, I set up usually Hungering with Puncturing Arrow, and Chakram with just, you'll often not have a rune very early on. You want to equip Chakram as soon as you get it, but Twin Chakrams as soon as you get that first rune there. This is what I'll pretty much use for the rest of the game whenever I use Chakram. Twin Chakrams just here. You get this nice and early, so usually I'll use Hungering Arrow and Chakram for that setup just there. Otherwise, I'll use bowlers, especially if you find something like Buriza. This is a good example of changing my build depending on the gear I find. I found Emmy's Duffel, which makes bowlers explode instantly, and Buriza, which makes your projectile pierce 2 additional times. With Bowler Shot, this is insane, because what happens is you fire a bowler. I used Imminent Doom, but I used Volatile Explosives until I got that. But essentially, it'll explode instantly as you hit mobs, and you'll hit 3 mobs total as you shoot through a pack. And each time it pierces through an enemy and hits another enemy, it explodes. So you get 3 explosions per shot of Bowler, which is exceptional damage, especially once you have that Imminent Boon rune. So that's a good example of changing depending on your gearing situation. So, other skills I like. I pretty much stick with Hungering Arrow, Entangling Shot, and Bowlers. I don't think Evasive Fire or Grenades are very good for leveling. And Bowlers is something I use, as I said, when I'm overgeared. When I'm less geared, I use Entangling Shot. And early in the game, I use Hungering Arrow to boost my single target damage. In terms of secondary effects, I very rarely use any of like Multi-Shot or Strafe. Multi-Shot is liked by a lot of people, but I prefer Twin Chakrams in pretty much all situations. Rain of Vengeance is a nice extra one to throw on, but generally I prefer Fan of Knives, so we'll go into Fan of Knives just here. Fan of Knives is great. I always run Fan of Knives while leveling as Demon Hunter. I pretty much ran it as soon as I got it until, like, I'm still running it, and I'll continue running it until I settle into my endgame spec. And generally you'll run this with just Pinpoint Accuracy when you unlock that. Then you'll run Bladed Armor, because this is a very nice sort of defensive setup for hardcore, and eventually you'll be using it is this one here, Fan of Daggers. Fan of Daggers has a 3-second stun. It's a guaranteed 3-second stun. This makes it an excellent defensive skill and an excellent offensive skill. This will let you burst down elites very quickly. You run next to the elite, you pop Fan of Daggers, or you get into a bad situation, you pop Fan of Daggers, it stuns everything. It's a great lifesaver. It saved my life a few times in a few hairy situations, and the damage is really good on it as well. 620 damage in 20 yards. Very, very solid skill all round, and one I love running for leveling in hardcore. Smokescreen is not very fun, but it's something you must always have on your bar as a hardcore Demon Hunter. You won't need it 90% of the time. However, it's still useful to have. Generally, I'll use Displacement early on, then Lingering Fog, and then once Healing Vapors is available, I'll use Healing Vapors because I find that a little bit more, to have a bit more utility, and I can use it a bit more often. If you're using Volt as well as a mobility skill, and that's certainly a good option, you'll want to use Lingering Fog instead of Healing Vapors because it gives you that higher duration for disciplines spent, and it's also a good idea at that point to consider, instead of using something like Companion, to use Preparation. So that gives you the worst thing is to be vaulting towards the next pack, have your discipline be empty, get into a bad situation, get chain frozen, and not have discipline. So having preparation as a backup is essential if you're running both Vault and Smokescreen. If you're just running Smokescreen, like I did most of the time leveling, then you could just be a little bit careful with your discipline and only use it when you're in danger to break those CCs, to get out of bad situations and stuff like that, and that's pretty much good. But I think as a hardcore Demon Hunter, you always want Smokescreen on your bar. It's just mandatory. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, for sure, for sure. Okay, so next up, I usually use Companion right from when I get Spider Companion. The Raven Companion's useless, don't worry with that, but Spider Companion's quite useful, especially if you're rocking Cold a Week. It'll slow everything on the screen, basically, and give you a lot more extra damage there, so I typically do run that. And then I later switch to Bat Companion, or Wolf Companion. Bat and Wolf are pretty much nice and easy to switch between, and these just help you clear a bit faster, basically, so nothing really too special just there. Once I get to level 61, I start using Vengeance with Personal Mortar, and then I eventually switch to Side Cannons for the healing as well. It's pretty nice, but Seether's good too. Any of the runes for Vengeance are just fine, really. Instead of Vengeance, if you're undergeared a bit, you can use Sentries. What I will do is, as I engage Elite, I'll drop those Sentries, and they are nice, efficient extra damage. You can just use those with pretty much any of the runes, really doesn't matter. But that's just nice extra damage if you're a little bit undergeared. Another really good option, and one that I used quite extensively, is Marked for Death. The normal Marked for Death rune and most of the other ones are pretty bad. Mortal Enemy is okay for taking down like bosses and elites and stuff like that, but for the most part, Contagion is amazing. Contagion is probably one of the best Marked for Death runes for leveling in the game. It's one of the best skills for leveling in the game in general, I think, and I did run this for a long time until I got Vengeance, and then I eventually switched over to Vengeance instead of this. But basically what you do is you curse something with Marked for Death, curse something you'll kill first. So if there's a pack of elites and there's some scorpions nearby, curse the scorpion, burst the scorpion down, and it'll start spreading. It'll start proliferating to 2 nearby enemies, to 2 nearby enemies, and it'll spread throughout the pack very quickly as you kill stuff. And this gives a big damage boost as well. So this is 20% extra damage, 1/5 extra damage for those monsters, and it chains throughout the pack, and it'll pretty much go with you. If you keep killing monsters, packs, it'll chain throughout all of the packs. Very nice damage increase. and a very nice skill all round. That is what I'll rock a lot of the time. So that's it for the main skills. Let's go through passives, the passives that I rate. Tactical Advantage you use as the first passive until you get it. Thrill of the Hunt's kind of useless. As soon as you get Blood Vengeance though, this will become a permanent thing on your toolbar. This just improves your leveling speed by a huge deal. Getting those health globes is something you should be doing anyway, and when you do, you'll be able to get that extra hatred to put out those extra cluster arrows or those extra chakrams, and when you're fighting a boss and he's popping out health globes, you'll just run towards the health globe and keep DPSing. It really is a massive DPS increase, even though it doesn't increase your tooltip DPS. Next up, I think Cull the Weak is one that I usually run as soon as it becomes available as well. I'll run that as my second passive, so Blood Vengeance, Cull the Weak go very nicely. As long as you're using Entangling Shot or the Spider, you usually have enough. You can also use, there is Caltrops earlier on, you can run Caltrops with Cull the Weak, but generally I just use Entangling Shot with Chain Gang or the Spider Rune to be able to proc that for the most part. If you don't want to run Cull the Weak, you're not running one of those other abilities, I quite like Hot Pursuit. If you're running Chakrams, for example, something that attacks very fast in a large AoE, you throw out a pair of Chakrams, and then you just keep running. A big run speed boost. This is also a really nice clear speed boost, especially for doing bounties. I really like Hot Pursuit quite a lot. But other than that, Archery is always a solid choice. I like Perfectionist as a defensive choice. It's a huge defensive boost and allows you to use your smokescreen and vaults a little bit more often, so that's a nice one to run in general, but just a nice safe option for hardcore. So other than that, just in terms of gearing's very simple in Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls now. You can pretty much just look for the green arrows. If something is a defensive and an offensive boost, then wear it, and most of the time that will be the case. I tend to prioritize a little bit DPS a little bit more these days because I guess I'm a bit more experienced in it, and it's pretty easy. I play at hard difficulty, which by the way is a nice balance between leveling speed. I never felt hard. Hard was easy occasionally, and I maybe could have jumped up to Master when I had a good set of legendaries, but hard seems to switch nicely as your gearing level changes between being just difficult enough but giving you a lot of XP and just easy enough, but you know, you can clear fast. So I quite liked hard difficulty. But generally, when I'm playing hard, I prioritize DPS a little bit more. If you're going to go for a higher difficulty for fun reasons, then you can obviously prioritize tankiness a little bit more. But generally, for your weapon, you just want to go with the highest base damage and dexterity. If you can get a socket, great, but don't really stress about it too much because a lot of the time you'll be finding an upgrade again soon, and Mystic crafting for sockets and stuff is often not worth the time it takes. Just keep upgrading those weapons as you can. Make sure to use and abuse the blacksmith as much as you can. Every time I level like 2 or 3 times, I go in, level up the blacksmith a few points, and then you see what gear's available and upgrade whatever is new. Make sure to keep your Templar upgraded as well. I recommend Templar as the follower, and I just use everything on the left side here. It's good stuff. These are all really good hardcore ones, and I like Templar with Demon Hunter in general, so a very solid choice. And otherwise, you know, for the rest of your gear, just try and get Dexterity, Vitality for leveling. You don't really need to worry about crit chance or crit damage. Even all the way up to 70, you can get carried just on base stats, base damage, and Dexterity all the way up to level 70. And then once you get to level 70, that's when you start looking for crit chance and crit damage and all of that. So pretty simple stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this and found this a bit helpful if you're leveling up a new hardcore Demon Hunter. It's good fun. Probably one of my favorite, well, it is my favorite class in the game, and it is pretty enjoyable playing in hardcore. I think the character plays well in hardcore, and it's not quite as easy as something like a Witch Doctor, but it feels quite fun to do. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching.